I've come to the understanding that my purpose in this life is to reorient and have people understand again about the importance of relationships, about the importance of investing in them, the importance of being intentional in them. I mean, that's why the podcast is all about relationships. The book is about relationships. What I do for work is about relationships. At the end of my life, I don't feel like my mission statement in life is to love and serve God, family, friends, clients, community, and the multi-generations of people I'll never see or meet, and thereby make an impact in this world.
Welcome to another episode of the Deeper Than Dope podcast. I have Rich Wu on here, and I'm super excited to reconnect with you. Welcome, Rich.
Thanks for having me on the show, Bennett. Pleasure to be here, man.
So we connected. I don't know how we connected, but I was on your podcast November 21st. We just looked it up, which was a great time. And anyways, yeah, super excited. How did we connect? First
we connected through some mutual friends, and they suggested that you might be a good guest on my show. You have a lot of experience with relationships. I know relationships are really important to you. And so you were an awesome guest. You had a lot of good wisdom and had a lot of insight for our guests.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited for you to do the same now for my podcast. So, Bruce, can you start off with a little bit of your background?
Yeah. So I actually originally grew up in Chicago. I'm in California now, married, have two little boys, 4 and 2 years old. And just reside in Irvine, California, enjoying life. By day, I run a wealth advisory firm called Catalyst Planning Partners. We have offices in Chicago and Southern California, and then host a podcast, The Power of Connections, and am about to release a book called The Relationship Recession. And, I know I encouraged you a little bit, Bennett, to write the book that you have inside of you, but that was a awesome experience for me, about 1.5 years, and it's going to be coming out soon. So be on the lookout.
Okay. How soon is soon?
Probably about 3 months. We're looking at about 3 months.
Awesome. That's super soon then. So congrats.
Yeah.
Has it been a pretty tough process?
Yes and no. I think tough in the sense that there's a lot of thinking that's involved. Initially, I thought the book would be just more about like relationships and even maybe some business networking. But the person that was kind of helping me write the book said that I should really think about not just what might be valuable to people, but what was an important message for me to get out. And so it kind of turned from like a business and practical like networking book to just a book about the importance of relationships. I mean, the premise of the book is, 1938, Harvard did the longest longitudinal study on happiness and longevity. And this study, they found that after tracking 800 people over 90 years, that the critical factor in people living long and being happy was not success or the money that they made. It was the degree to which they had, deep, meaningful relationships that kept them living long and happy along the way. So, to that end, I think, if you read a lot of the stats in America today, 50% of Americans are dissatisfied with the level of their friendships. 57% of Americans feel somewhat or lonely most of the time. We're talking about over 100 million people. The book is addressing that and practical ways to get out of a rut if you're stuck in, relationship, in a relationship rut, and how to get out of that.
Yeah, I just over the weekend hanging out with some guys, and he was part of like this men's group mastermind, and they were talking about like just vulnerability. So that the guy running the group is, take a step forward if you've had XYZ problem. If you cheat, like serious stuff, like cheated on a spouse or a porn addiction or XY. And it was crazy that kind of the message and what we're talking about was this was kind of the only group that a lot of these men they've been carrying these things for years and years and never had anybody close enough that they trusted to talk to about it and let it out. They didn't have those close relationships. So then they're just carrying all of that shit by themselves, not knowing how to who to turn to get help. So anyways, it's Jimmy Rex was the guy running the mastermind. We are the they. Anyway, super cool. I feel like those, at least I'm becoming more aware of those types of masterminds and men's groups. Cause I do think, I don't know, you tell me actually, is it more men that have issues with close relationships, or do you think it's more women? Do you know?
I would say on average, if I had to like generalize, it's definitely more men. I think women, on average, are a little bit more prone to or open to sharing about their feelings and talking about kind of the important stuff, reaching out. Hey, let's grab a coffee. And for whatever reason in our society, I'm not like this, but I feel like a lot of men that I run into, it's almost kind of frowned upon to like, hey man, let's reach out. Let's get together and let's grab a coffee or let's give dinner. I think there's just kind of this masculine, like, oh, I don't need people. This energy of like, oh, if I reach out and tell people that I'm kind of in a tough spot, that it's showing a sign of weakness. And I feel like there's a lot of stigma attached to, reaching out and staying in touch. And I also think in general, because of that, we're as men generally not, we don't have those disciplines, those routines built in. So we're not used to doing it. Even if you want to do it, if you're like, oh man, Bennett, I haven't seen you in a while. It's like, wait, I don't know is it weird? Do I reach out? Forget it. I think that's what happens a lot of time.
Yeah. And I think the more that anybody, especially men, can share that. So, I mean, this is a text message from today at 10:48 from my buddy Brandon. We did like a mushroom psychedelic experience over the weekend. And he says, hey man, been in a funk, depressed, anxious state. And I feel for the last month or two, that mushroom experience really seemed to clear my head and get me through a better state. Thank you a ton for bringing that. And then that opened up for me. I was like, dude, me too. Like the last few months have been hell for me. And now we're going back and forth, just two dudes talking about our emotions and anxieties, which is so cool because honestly, I wouldn't have shared that with him unless he probably did that first, So
that's right.
I do feel like that, at least the spaces that I'm getting into, because I'm getting more into that psychedelic space. And yeah, if you want to be vulnerable, take some psychedelics, because you're just like, who cares, and I really like that. That introduced me to telling myself, my family and friends that I don't have empathy, to realizing, oh, I have actually massive amounts of empathy. I just hit it, and these different meditative states or psychedelic states, I really don't bring that out. So anyways, that's been very big for me.
Well, I think therein lies exactly what we're talking about, right? Because I think folks who, do psychedelics, even just drink to take some of the edge off and to open up. I mean, we as a society, and especially men in general, like, could we form the discipline to just be a little bit more vulnerable without some of those things? Mm-hmm. And I think it takes some intention. I think it takes a lot of thought. But I think we can get there. So, if it means that you need some extra things to kind of help you get there, great. But wouldn't it be awesome if we could just do that as a part of like normal daily living, to be able to just open up and share and not worry about what the other person is thinking about or worry about what other people think about us.
Yeah. The balance between, I listened to a podcast, Sam Harris, and he was talking about why he promotes psychedelics, because he goes, you can experience those states without psychedelics. You can do that through deep meditation. The issue is you put 100 people in a room and you ask them to meditate for 10 minutes. 95% of them don't find anything interesting, and it's not going to be life changing. You put 100 people 3 grams of mushrooms, all of them are going to find something interesting in their mind.
Yeah. That's right.
That jump start. And then really, at least my belief right now is when you do these psychedelic experiences, it's not about the experience itself. It's about the 7 weeks after the experience.
That's right.
At least a few days after the experience, that your neuroplasticity is increased, but that, 7 or so weeks after is what did I see, feel, and how am I going to integrate that in my life? So it's mostly the integration piece rather than the actual, 2 or 3 hours of being in a different mental state. It's how am I going to integrate that in my life? That's really what's very important. And that's the difference between doing mushrooms and going out and doing partying just for fun, which whatever. I don't know how people do that. Amazing mushroom experiences, or doing it in like a guided session. You have, somebody that's very experienced, 5 to 10 people, you're setting intentions, you're taking it together as a group. Some of it's to get, kind of solo time. Some of it's you sharing experiences with others. But for me, as well as my wife and a lot of my family that I've gotten into, has been very therapeutic and allowed for a lot deeper connections and just increased vulnerability. So
yeah, you're right. Well, I think you're touching on something interesting because on the one hand, like psychedelics, you take them and automatically, because of the effect, you're able to kind of like relax and slow down and be open. Getting someone to meditate if they've never meditated before for 10 minutes, it's a lot of work, and not everyone's willing to kind of put in that work. The in-between that I found is, I was telling you this before, I've hosted these Jeffersonian dinners where we get like, let's say 8 people together, small, intimate environment, over a dinner. And, the format is really interesting because there's a prompt in advance. So for example, what's a perspective change that you've had recently that's been very eye-opening for you, right? That you made. Everyone gets a chance to share. So it's not the loudest person that gets to talk. Everyone gets a chance to talk. And while that person's talking, no one else can talk. The moderator, the key there is the moderator, whoever launches off that question, has to share vulnerably, because that sets the tone for the rest of the dinner. And what I found is that when you can create that environment, so you're not forcing someone to meditate, and you didn't necessarily have to, do something, physiologically to get to a certain state, it can create a place where people feel safe to open up about things that they wouldn't normally share. And so these dinners, I started these dinners a couple of years ago, and I found that there's a big hunger and demand for this type of environment, because most places, there's a lot of pretense. You can't really share how you feel. You don't want to get judged. You don't want to share too much information because you don't feel safe. There's very few environments where people feel open enough to talk about real things in life. That's the reality.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree. I mean, I didn't need to meditate or take any psychedelics to receive that text message today, acknowledge his emotions, and then share my emotions, and then, kind of come together. It really does start with that.
That's right.
Willing to be vulnerable first and get the other members of society, friends, whatever, that same permission. You're spending a lot of your, energy, whether it's writing the book or these group settings, on the relationships. And you mentioned the Harvard study. Did you find out about the Harvard study and say, I want to go all in on relationships? Or were you already focused on relationships and then kind of found the Harvard study? And really the question is, why are you focusing so much on relationships?
Man, that is such a good question. It's crazy that you asked that, because I've been thinking about that. I feel like a lot of the projects I was working on were pre-learning about the Harvard study. So this all started like years ago, but I was thinking in the last couple of years about like, okay, I'm writing this book because it's a passion project. I'm doing this podcast because I'm passionate about it. Like I run my business that involves people and relationships and understanding what their needs are. That's something that I'm passionate about. And I was like, what's the theme? Do these things all come together? And more recently, I think I've come to realize, when they talk about like, what's your purpose in life? Like, why are you here? It's not just to make some money or to go to a nice restaurant. Those are things that we do. But what is your actual reason for like why you think you've been placed here going forward? And it doesn't necessarily have to be like world changing, but everybody has that to some degree, right? Or they're looking for it. And I feel like I've come to the understanding that my purpose in this life is to reorient and have people understand again about the importance of relationships, about the importance of investing in them, the importance of being intentional in them. I mean, that's why the podcast is all about relationships. The book is about relationships. What I do for work is about relationships. Because at the end of my life, I don't feel like my mission statement in life is to love and serve God, family, friends, clients, community, and the multi-generations of people I'll never see or meet, and thereby make an impact in this world. Because I can make a ton of money, I can be the smartest guy in the world, but at my deathbed, am I counting how much money is in my bank account? Am I telling people how smart I am at my deathbed? No, I'm thinking, hey, did I have a good relationship with my wife? Do my kids love me? Was I there for my friends at the end of my life? Are people going to show up to my funeral? Like, those are the things that actually matter at the end of your life. So I feel like a lot of the projects that I'm working on, it's with that focus, like to inspire other people to, again, be reminded that relationships and people are important. Stuff, money, all that stuff fades away,
When did you make that realization? And the most people that I talk to, including myself, like, me making progress. So it's typically because I had to focus on money and then I achieved some sort of financial success and I realized that there's not much to it.
Yeah.
Is that similar to you, or were you able to achieve that without kind of having to go through all of the, once I'm a millionaire, I'm going to be so happy?
I think having got to a certain financial position, you definitely realize like, oh, wait, I was striving all this time to make a certain amount of money and build a business. And I'm here. Wait, this isn't necessarily in and of itself making me happy. I think that's certainly helped reinforce it. I would say maybe about 10 years ago, I'm 43, maybe in my early 30s, I started thinking about that. Hence why I wrote like my mission statement. And it was oriented around people. Before that, there was a period of time where I was like, oh, it's about impact. It's about impact. Like we need to help certain causes and things. Yeah, that's fine. But I think impact is made through people. And at the end of the day, if you focus on people, impact can be made. If you just focus on impact, you might forget about the relationships along the way. Like I could donate $100 million and have a statue erected in my name. But like, again, if I don't have great relationships, people, I burn people along the way. I divorced my wife. Like, what is that ultimately going to do for me? Great. I have a statue and a bunch of money, but like that doesn't mean anything. And the reverse could be true. I can make a ton of incredible relationships and have impact on people. And if I don't leave a bunch of money to my kids or, I don't have a statue with my name on it, like I don't think that I'd have any regrets in life.
Yeah. What was, I guess, if you're talking to somebody who hasn't gone through that yet, doesn't have a mission statement, what are the steps in creating that? And what kind of triggers you? And if you don't mind, I'll share really quick. For me, because I only did this in the last 2 years. I was part of a mastermind group and they just kept pitching on, you have to do this, you have to do this. So you could have, so you're aligned on what you actually want. So I read a book, it was called Unf Your Business, that talked all about the steps. And then I texted everybody, what are my core values? And I put it in a spreadsheet and then I ranked them all. Then I wrote my own obituary and it came very clear. And I wrote the mission statement, then my company adapted it. And it's been one of the best things. And I'm like, freak, I had a whole nother business that I ran and I exited and I never even really did that. And it's just such a big difference. So I'm a very big believer in nailing that down. So what would be your advice?
Yeah, I don't think I have like a formula, but a couple things come to mind. One, I would find some mentorship or get some advice from someone that you really respect that's a lot older than you. Yeah, if you're 25, I'm not talking about a 35-year-old. If you're 25, find someone who's like 70 years old that you respect, like your grandfather, maybe your friend's grandfather that that you're like, oh man, this is a good guy. He's lived a good life. And I would start asking him questions like, what are some things that you've done in your life like that you are glad that you did? What are mistakes that you made along the way? And I think when you talk to older people in their 70s and 80s, you'll start realizing a lot of them are saying the same things. A lot of the things that I thought that was important in my 20s and 30s wasn't important. The things that I understand now, I wish I could have changed. And you'll start seeing themes. I also think it's true just doing an exercise of just thinking about the future, like, the whole idea of like planning your own funeral. Like, what do you want people to say about you at your end of your life? Oh my gosh, he made a ton of money. Like, really? I think if people are honest, I think if people are honest with themselves, like, yeah, it'd be cool. But if that's the only thing they said, yeah, he made a ton of money. Like, I don't know, he's kind of a jerk.
Yeah.
I don't know if people would be happy about that sort of funeral, So I think also doing the exercise of keeping the end in mind and then working backwards is a very sobering thing. It takes some maturity to do that. So I think talking to people that are way ahead of you, that you respect, that are good human beings, that you're like, man, I hope to be half the man that person is. I think that could be good. And again, keeping the end in mind and working backwards.
I like that advice a lot. That's something that I'm looking back. I don't think I've ever done that. Like, I've asked for advice from here or there, but asking advice from somebody who's retired versus somebody who's still in it, that's way different. And also asking do they really have an agenda with you? Is there any reason to bullshit you, or are they just going to be real? And I'm like, yeah, man, I need to go do that. I like that advice.
By the way, I just had someone on my podcast who I met who was a mentor of one of my friends, and he's like, you got to interview this guy. And his name's John Ritchie. and the episode isn't out yet, but he's in his 70s and he's dying from stage 4 cancer. And I was just, after the podcast, I had a long conversation with him, and some of the stuff that he was saying, it was just like very eye-opening. And sometimes, you hear things like, hey, treat your parents right. And like, you hear that and you're like, yeah. But when someone is like dying and you know that they have a lot of wisdom, they have a lot of experience, they need nothing from you, and they start saying those same things again, it carries a different weight. So yeah, there's something to talking to like people that are far ahead of us.
That's awesome. They have so many more years and you just learn things. But I also think that any communication, it's hard to not have an agenda. We're always trying to hustle. We're always trying to sell something. We're always trying to convince you of our ideas and this and that. But somebody in that stage of life, it's like, it's a lot more likely that you're just going to be real.
That's right.
Shifting gears a little bit on mental health. Your husband, your father, your business owner. What are some struggles, if you're open to sharing any, that you've experienced in the past, and what are some things that you've done to overcome this?
Man, this is a good question. My son is 4 now, but he was severely speech delayed. I don't think he said more than a couple words up until like he was maybe like 3.5 years old. And man, I'll tell you, I'm not one of those dads that are like, look, you got to get into Stanford and also play Division I basketball or else like you're a failure. I'm not one of those dads, but I have aspirations. Like I want my kids to do well in school. I want my kids to be good at sports, right? All these things that I push myself in, like I want my kids to be. But man, when you're in like a little preschool or, your kids are around other young kids that are younger than them, and they're talking and they're communicating and your kid can't even say a word and all he does is scream. Man, it's a really tough place to be in, and I don't really get down that easily, but man, that was really, really hard for me. Because I'm like, is my kid going to be normal? Like, is my kid going to be able to have like a normal childhood? And I'll tell you, thank God, like in the last 6 months, we got him to speech therapy and we did a lot of work with him and he's doing great. Like he's speaking now and he's doing fine. But I'll tell you, when you go through things like that, it teaches you a lot about you. And it also makes you thankful for the things that we all take for granted. Because if my son was speaking at 8 months old and walking at 6 months, and I'd be like looking at other people who are going through that. First, I wouldn't have any empathy. Second, I'd be like, what's wrong with your kid? Like my kid's walking at 8 months. Your kid can't walk at 1.5 years. Oh, your kid's speaking at 3.5. My kid was speaking at 1. It's easy to have like that. I'm awesome. What's wrong with you? Now, I have a ton of empathy for folks who have kids that have some delays with their children. Could be permanent delays. And I'm like, man, my heart goes out because I know it's so difficult. But at the same time, it's also just giving me appreciation for basic things. The fact that my kid, sometimes he just my son comes up to me and just says, Dad, like, hey, I had a great time at school. And the fact that he's just talking, I'm so excited. I'm like, man, I'm so proud of you. He's like, proud of what? But I'm just so thankful that he can do some of the basic things. So it's so interesting, like how those like life lessons can take you through the valley, but how they're also blessings in disguise to shape your character and who you are in the future.
And imagine there's 2 parts that could be very difficult on that. There's one of the natural worry for my son. Like, is he going to live a normal life? Is he going to get made fun of? Is he going to be loved? Is he going to have friends? And then there's also what does this say about me as a parent? Am I not a good parent? Because like, do you feel like you went through one more than the other, a little bit of both?
Yeah, I think both of those things are true. I was worried for him about, like, is he going to have any friends? Like he can't even talk and he just goes, like who wants to be friends with that? No, like very few people. And then for me, when your kid is screaming and that they have a speech delay and they have challenges, but the other parents don't, they're just thinking like, what's wrong with your son? Like, you must be a terrible parent. You're not, your kid's hitting my kid, your kid's yelling, and they have no idea. So they're not even judging you based on the right things. They're just like making assumptions. And then you feel the weight of that. You're like, oh my gosh, you feel embarrassed, you feel judged, you feel awkward, you want to shrink away. Like maybe I should just like not have my kid hang out with other kids. So yeah, it's tough on both ends, man. It's really tough. But because I went through that now, I think the incredible thing is that now I have an understanding. Now I'm actually not quick to judge when some other kid maybe grabs my kid's toy and then just screams when my kid grabs it back. And I'm like, oh, okay, there might be some issues here that I'm not understanding. He's not just a terrible person, and their parents aren't terrible people either, you know?
What would be the advice, like going through that? So now you're kind of through the phase here, and your son's made this progress, but what were you telling yourself during that journey to help you get through that? And
what's so funny? Yeah, go ahead.
This is something to think about if you want to incorporate it in your answer. Because I was just talking about, the free will that we have or don't have, with someone on a dinner 2 nights ago. And I said, well, a kid is born and they're peeing their diaper, right? Are they choosing to pee their diaper, or does it just happen? So what do they go from, instincts, genetics, and environment to actually having free will, or is it not? And it's just, we are who we are, and we're just simply the observers of this life. And let's be grateful for it. Let's have empathy for others. Let's not have judgment, shame, guilt, or pride, because really it's just a chain reaction. And I was asking somebody, like, can you pinpoint that? Like, when do they go from pooping themselves to free will? Like, what at what age? And I don't think there is an age, right? I think it's just, we are, consciousness is observing, this human avatar. And that's helped me had a lot of empathy on, anybody, whether it's a kid or adult. Everybody's just kind of doing what they're doing because of product and environment. Anyway, different.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I will tell you that at 43, if you can't control your bowel movements, there's probably some sort of challenge with whether. But I think one of the biggest things that I learned during that time was how important it was, if I wanted to teach my son to manage his emotions, that it was less about what I said and was more about how I reacted. Right? Because if my son is 2-3 years old and I'm like, stop, he can't talk. So then he gets frustrated and I'm like, stop getting frustrated. Okay. Even if you could understand that, what is he seeing modeled for him? He's not hearing what I'm saying. He's seeing a very frustrated person. Right. And so for me, I think what I realized is number one, I need to learn how to self-regulate my own emotions. Like, wow, I didn't realize I needed to work on that a lot. And number two, I have to do that not just for myself, but if I want my kids to grow up to be able to self-regulate and not just melt down all the time, like that's not just me telling them how to do that. I got to model it for them. So I think that was one of the things that I had to constantly say to myself, like, okay, you need to calm down because A, you're getting worked up. But number two, if you're worked up, your kids aren't going to learn anything from it. If you're just yelling at them and screaming and getting all angry and just acting out of emotion, you're not going to teach them anything but that. Yeah. And so I had to remind myself of that 1,000 times a day.
Yelling at somebody to stop yelling or yelling, It's like, wait,
stop yelling. Okay, yeah, they're really going to stop yelling.
Yeah, man, kids just pick up on all those little things. So that's amazing that you're self-aware. Like, I can't be frustrated, telling him to stop being frustrated, or else I'm just showing him the example that it's okay to be frustrated. So
exactly.
Anyways, I appreciate you opening up and sharing that. And I think all parents will go through that in any extent. Everybody's kids will struggle with different things and excel in different, especially if you have more than one kid. And it's also fun to see how different all of them are. I'm on, my third kid is much different than my first and the middle. And it's a blast. It's a learning experience, and they're all crazy and I'm crazy and we're all just figuring it out, but it's a good time.
That's right.
Shifting gears. So again, appreciate you sharing that. What's something that you feel like you've done that have helped other people get through their mental health challenges or struggles?
It's a good question. What's something that I've helped? I can think about. I'm thinking about like some of my friends. I actually talk about this in my book about the importance of like a regular cadence in connecting with friends and having like meaningful conversations. One of the things that I did when I moved to California from Chicago was I knew I couldn't stay in touch with everybody, but I have a small group of like high school friends that I still keep in touch with. And I said, hey guys, the reality is we won't be able to just like go over to each other's house like randomly on a Wednesday night. Well, at least I won't be able to going forward. But I want to still keep in touch. So I said, I know this kind of sounds weird, but how about we do this? Like once a month, can we just get on like an hour and a half Zoom call and just catch up? And this is going to be more for me than for you guys because you can do that easily, but I think it'll benefit all of us. And everybody was on board. And I think what that did was to create a routine that felt normal, where we could just get together and talk about real life things on a consistent basis. And I think that was helpful for me, right? Because I'm the lone man away, just to kind of stay connected, have some encouragement, be able to laugh, share some deep things with my good buddies. I think it was also helpful for them though, too, because I think that without that sort of routine, they might not have met up with each other, right? They might not have made the effort because A, I'm kind of the connector of the group, and B, these guys are all busy. So it's, a lot of times in their friendships, even the close ones, they're just reactive, right? It's like, oh yeah, if someone calls me up, I'll do something. And then no one calls each other up. And then 6 months go by and then you haven't seen like some of your best friends, So I think that's something just practically that I was able to do for my friends that A, was going to help me, but B, help them in the same way.
And then I'll add on the dinners that you're having, the book you're writing, the podcast, I'll do a ton of stuff for you. But I like you shared that. And I think like what group of friends wouldn't want that? Mm-hmm. But how many group of friends are not doing that? 99.9%, because they don't have the one person to say, hey, let's do this. They don't have that one person, and I do feel like maybe there is some stigma around it. Like, wait, we're just going to talk and catch up. Like we're talking about feelings, I like that. We do lunches quite often with buddies. Like, let's make this every other Friday rather than like, hey, who wants to go tomorrow? And I do feel like setting up those routines are super important for mental, whatever they are, but having those rituals, especially when it's focusing on relationships.
That's right.
So anyways, I love that, especially group of dudes and just knowing that you're there for each other and you can open up, shoot the shit, talk about funny things, serious things, just whatever. So that's awesome. Last question for you, and you might have already answered a little bit, but I'm going to ask you anyway. It seems like you have put some thought in it. What is the legacy that you want to leave behind?
Yeah, the legacy that I want to leave behind is at the end of my life, and I kind of mentioned this before, I feel like if there's people that show up in my funeral, hopefully my family, close friends at the very least, colleagues, people that I've done business with, just the greater connections that I've made. If people at my funeral said of me, like, man, Rich, he wasn't perfect, but in the interactions, I felt like he really cared about me. He tried to serve me in whatever way, in the best way possible. And that they could take that on and to be that for other people. Man, I don't think I'd have any regrets at the end of my life. So if nothing else, if I don't leave a dime to my kids or anything, if I leave that sort of legacy, that impact, and that people can carry that on forever, I'll be forever grateful.
I love that. Love that answer. Appreciate you sharing that. Thank you for being on the show. How can our listeners connect with you?
Yeah, please find me on the Power of Connections podcast. We release an episode every Monday. And then when my book comes out, The Relationship Recession, I'm so excited about it. Would love for you to check it out. So,
okay. Rich, we will definitely do that. Thank you so much for being a guest.
All right. Thanks, Bennett.